Information fueled.
Opinion driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
We talk news.
5:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 89.7 WTN. Big day today. Apparently, we're going to see some of the Epstein files today.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, that's what Pam Bondi said last night.
Yes,
We
she
have
did.
that story in the news. Elon attends Donald Trump's first cabinet meeting, and I thought it was interesting, and I've got a lot of the relevant audio coming up in the show today as it continues to unfold. But there was one point where Trump actually said, listen, if there's anybody, and I'm paraphrasing, if there's anybody who has a problem with Elon Musk, we'll throw you out right now. So clearly, Trump, over his Senate-confirmed cabinet officials, Trump is taking the side of Elon Musk. We also have Democrats now out there saying that Doge is literally killing people. So we have all kinds of news stories for you today. But I do believe that it's going to be a big day for a lot of folks with the Epstein files, at least some of them being released. And by the way, if you'd like to check out the Daily Dan poll, find us on YouTube, and you can find us on Super Talk 99.7. Watch and subscribe as you watch the radio program this morning. And every day we do the Daily Dan poll. And today's poll is, how important are the Epstein files to you? Are they very important? Are they somewhat important? You don't care at all? Or this is a distraction? So that is part of our coverage this morning. I guess what they're saying, and I have seen so much online, varying reports and what's going to come out, what's not going to come out, when it's going to come out. So the very latest, it seems to me, is that there is going to be some of this information on the Epstein client list and the flight logs and all of that. Some will be released today. It will continue into tomorrow. FBI Director, of course, Kash Patel, he has been saying that on day one, the files would be released. And of course, now we are some 5 weeks into the Trump administration.
So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past.
And that is, of course, Senator Marsha Blackburn. By the way, a big day for the senator, because she has been, as you know, and I've interviewed her countless times now on many things, including the Epstein client list. And she has been, as far as the Senate goes, she's really been on the front lines of getting this information out there. Well, now, Attorney General Pam Bondi was on Jesse Waters' show last night, and she says that, yes, we will be seeing something today.
Tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
Yeah, that was last night saying tomorrow, meaning today, we're going to see something. So let's look at some of the information that is on her desk, because apparently there's a lot. You've got the flight logs. You've got the various recordings from the island and from the plane and from his homes. You've got the accounts of victims. I'm sure there are many interviews from the people who worked on the island as well. You've got the interviews with the victims. And so there's a lot of information.
Hopefully tomorrow is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay. Well,
along with his co-defendant.
Absolutely. And he had help. That's for sure.
He sure did.
So if they release the names from the flight logs, and I did mention this the other day, what if somebody took a flight but wasn't part of that whole thing? We saw that from previous releases of information. We have seen some names already released. This was back, I think, in January of 2024, about a year ago or so. You had, of course, we all know the names, right? Bill Clinton, Leonardo DiCaprio, Alan Dershowitz, Naomi Campbell, of course, Prince Andrew. Donald Trump has been named in all of this as well. But they were very they really wanted to stress that no, all these people, just because their names were on this list and flight logs or listed in the court documents, that didn't mean that they did anything wrong. It just meant that they were in Epstein's orbit. And again, I will remind folks, just because you're named in all these legal documents, even if stuff comes out today, we'll have to see if they are actually proven that they had done something wrong, if they had done something untoward with all of these underage girls. But there is this demand that we know these names, and Pam Bondi says, yep, you know what, we're on it.
There are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have, well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information.
Yep. And so now the question is, why the delay after all these years? Well, number one is you have a lot of people who were, again, not to belabor the point, but they were involved in Epstein, maybe business-wise, maybe part of a social circle, but they had no idea what he was involved in. I mean, remember Donald Trump. Donald Trump says that he was a friend of Epstein's for years, and then eventually they drifted apart. And my own personal feeling is, and maybe I read this somewhere, I'm not sure, but my own personal feeling is that Trump perhaps heard what was going on with Epstein and decided to put that relationship, at arm's length, if you will. And maybe there's a lot of people that are like that. Alan Dershowitz has been, his name has swirled around this story for as long as it's been around. And Dershowitz is one of the leading people that is saying, release all of the information. Because he will tell you, if you've listened to interviews with Dershowitz about this, he has said, I didn't do anything wrong. And he's gone through all of the different ways that he has proven that he didn't do anything wrong. And so you do have a lot of people that have been sort of captured in this whole story that may not have done anything wrong, but they were in Epstein's orbit. They were named in legal documents for whatever reason. They were on flight logs, but maybe nothing was happening on the Lolita Express that day. I don't know. You do need to make sure this isn't a witch hunt where people's lives are destroyed because they're in these documents. They're listed in these documents. And I think most people understand that. A lot of people say that, by the way, Epstein was a foreign agent. They do. Have you ever heard this, Joan, that he was a foreign agent?
I have not heard that.
Yeah, working with Israel's Mossad. He was supposedly, this is how the story goes, that he was blackmailing prominent figures. You lure them in with, parties and sex and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Get them doing illegal, immoral things, ghastly things, sickening things, as Pam Bondi says. Then you blackmail them and you use that influence to your political advantage. Other people, by the way, say that he was CIA. So there's a lot here that we don't know about Epstein, or what happened on the plane, or what happened on the island, or what his why he was doing it. I mean, there's a number of reasons why. Clearly, number one, there's just a sick pleasure in what he was doing, and of course, there's a lot of people that were involved in this as well. And the whole thing is obviously just gross. And if there's anybody who is on this list or in these legal documents, and you can prove that they did something wrong, they did something untoward, they participated in the abuse or the trafficking of these girls, then they absolutely need to be held accountable. And again, part of the big question in all of this is some of our allies involved in this? Important people that may be part of all of this. We all know what happened with Prince Philip? Prince Philip. Yeah. So is any of our allies, important people in our government's orbit, wrapped up in all of this? That could be also a part of the conversation. That could be part of the reason why this has been delayed for so long. But again, big day for Senator Marsha Blackburn, because she has been pushing this for a long time. So go to YouTube. And if you would, take the poll, watch us on YouTube, and take the poll. How important are the Epstein files to you? Very important, somewhat important, I don't care at all, or this is a distraction. And you've got the polling up, KGB, and what are people saying so far?
Yeah, it looks like 46% say this is very important. 32 say somewhat. 0% say I don't care. We did change the last one of just like other things are important / distraction. I think that puts it in the same category, you know, and that's 21%.
Okay.
But 0% do not like say they don't care. So that, I think that's a very telling part there.
Everybody cares at least a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the bigger stories of the last decade. Has to be, right?
I can't imagine somebody wouldn't care at all.
Yeah, especially how the suspicion of his death also puts this into perspective. Like, this could have easily, like, how high does this go, you know?
Do you remember how ridiculous, real quickly, Joan and KGB, do you remember how ridiculous it was when they were trying to say that, you know, he committed suicide? But the guards, what was it? They
they left
fell
him.
asleep.
They fell asleep. They both fell asleep.
He was on suicide watch, and they left him. You don't do that, especially in prison.
Right. I mean, obviously, especially knowing what this guy knows or knew at the time. The connections, all of that.
And the cameras weren't working also, if you remember that.
They also cameras weren't working. Like, the whole thing, just ridiculous.
I remember there was a poll out, like only 29% truly believed he killed himself. Like in the entire, of like all the people they polled. And that's a scary low number. Like people are like, you didn't hide this very well.
You want a 100%, you know, on one side poll. Did Epstein kill himself? Yes or no?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Do you remember? I think it was like someone like involved with the Clintons. Like they found him hanging, but with a gunshot wound to his chest as well, like a shock. Do you know who I'm talking about? You remember that?
I do. Vince Foster.
Vince Foster. Yeah.
Vince Foster. Yeah.
And that was during Whitewater, right?
Correct.
That was in the 90s.
So, yeah.
It's like how can you believe like no one just hangs himself and shoots himself in the chest with a shotgun? Like that's almost impossible.
Well, I think it is impossible.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be like, I got to make sure this happens.
Okay, now you've got me visualizing I'm hanging from a tree and I've got a gun and I'm going to shoot myself.
Not just a gun, a shotgun.
A shotgun.
Yeah,
that.
It's not just a pistol.
So I'm hanging and I'm going to shoot myself with a shotgun.
Yeah.
I just don't see it.
Yeah, and then...
Well, maybe he shot himself first, realized it wasn't working, you know, if he...
Oh, yeah, just bleeding from the chest. I'm going to just go to a tree 2 doors over.
I'm gonna shoot myself in the chest, then throw a rope over a tree, and it just happens to be tied in that hanging...
Do you remember Norm Macdonald's weekend updates during that time? Oh, they were so funny. He remember he went on The View and went, oh yeah, Clinton's a murderer. He didn't know that? Remember he went on The View?
Oh yeah.
That? Oh, it was
well, that was when he actually, was it that storyline or the OJ storyline? But that's one of the reasons why he got fired.
OJ was the reason because the execs were good friends with OJ.
Yep.
But the Clintons probably didn't help either.
No.
Here's a Washington Post headline. No, Donald Trump, there's nothing fishy about Vince Foster's suicide.
Oh, you can't be serious. Everybody, like, I wasn't alive back then and I knew that was fishy. I was still in my dad, for God's sakes.
519 on Nashville's Morning News. Have we done traffic? We did not do traffic.
No, there's nothing going on.
We
anyway.
went deep down the rabbit hole.
Well, you know what? It's not really all that deep. I mean, I think I laid it out pretty well with what Pam Bondi said, what we're going to see maybe today, at some point today, maybe some point tomorrow. I don't know. What are you seeing, Joan? Are you seeing, because I saw not till tomorrow, then I saw today, then I saw somebody post on social media that the release of these documents is on hold till further notice. Now, I don't know what the truth is, but from what I can tell, there is going to be something released today. I just don't know if it's going to satisfy.
No.
And here's the other question.
So you had to parse those words that Pam Bondi used. She said, like some files?
Some files.
So, no, it's not going to satisfy anybody, and it's going to leave more questions. They need to release the whole darn thing. Do it.
And that was going to be my question. Will people ever be satisfied with what is released? Because there's always going to be people that are going to say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And there's a lot of stuff that, as you know, and I just talked about some of it, a lot of this stuff is, and has been swirling online for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who will swear up and down that he was working with the CIA. There are people that will swear up and down that he was working for Israel, and so and their intelligence agencies and what have you. So, I mean, I did pretty good amount of research this morning. There's nothing proven, as far as I can tell. And listen, you folks, if I'm over my skis on this, feel free to send me whatever links you have that actually prove that he was working for either our intelligence agencies or Israel's or, any other country. If there's something that actually proves it, as opposed to just, some randos on Twitter or X saying, oh yeah, he absolutely did. Okay, well, what proof do you have?
Yeah.
That's the problem. And so I think there's a lot of things that swirl about Jeffrey Epstein that, how when people talk about things, they just, I forget what you call it, but they talk about it so much as it is fact when it may not be fact, but the more that it's discussed, people just assume that it's true. And I don't know what's been proven or what hasn't been proven as far as Epstein working with our intelligence agencies or any other nations, but I don't see any actual proof, just a lot of people saying it happened. So, but where there's smoke, there's fire as well. So yep. I don't know. What do you think, Joan? Do you think he was working for Israel? You think he was working for the CIA?
It's funny that you mentioned that. It's not something that I had ever heard. And if anything, I would say, the CIA has just been creepy for, I don't even know how long, ever since, when I think about John F. Kennedy's death and, all that's been said about the CIA linked to that.
Yep.
It's been a long time that we have suspected that our own CIA is against us, works against us. So it could be. Well,
and here's the other thing, Joan, is we have found out just in the past, 8 years, just how bad the intelligence agencies and these law enforcement agencies have been at working against the American people, whether it was a duly elected president, whether it is either trying to obfuscate something that was real, like, for example, Hunter Biden's laptop, things like that.
Yeah.
We can go back to, going after Carter Page and Donald Trump's first run for office and the FISA warrants. All that stuff that we always talk about. Really, in the last 8 years, there has been a lot that has come into the more common social media. There's always things that were out there that people would talk about with the CIA or the FBI. That was always there, and it is always true, but it wasn't common knowledge. Now, in the last 8 years, thanks to Donald Trump, all of those things are far, far more common knowledge than before. These are no longer rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. These are just stories that people know. And people who know the stories and pay attention to the Inspector General's reports and the congressional investigations and so forth, and you either choose to look at the truth and accept it as the truth, as what the intelligence agencies did and all of that. You can either accept the truth or you can stick your head in the sand. But all of that has really come into play in the last 8 years, knowing what these various agencies within the government has done, especially against Donald Trump. So there you go. 5:24, and enough of my soapboxing. Joan Jones has the news coming up. Joan.
Yeah, one Brentwood neighbor shoots another in a bizarre and intense incident. Also, a beloved Hollywood actor has died.
I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game. In my book, we're going to be winners.
Yeah.
Okay?
What police are saying about Gene Hackman's death. Those stories and more coming up at 5:30
By the way,
Talk, yes.
I want to know what your favorite and KGB, and I'll talk about what my favorite Gene Hackman movie is.
It's going to be in my last story of this upcoming newscast, and I'm going to play the soundbite from my very favorite Gene Hackman movie.
I'll see if I can find mine.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
That and a lot more coming up on WTN.